Chapter 1. The Yuletide Invitation. The frost had settled over London like a delicate veil, turning the cobblestones of Baker Street into a glistening mosaic under the gaslights. Hercule Poirot, the diminutive Belgian detective with a moustache as precise as his mind, sat in his cosy flat, the fire crackling merrily in the hearth. It was the morning of December 20th, and the air was thick with the anticipation of Christmas. Poirot, however, was not one for idle festivity. His orderly soul found the chaos of the season mildly vexing, though he admitted a certain charm in the carols that drifted through his window. On this particular morning, Poirot was engaged in the meticulous task of arranging his correspondence. His friend and confidant, Captain Hastings, had departed for a family gathering in the countryside, leaving Poirot to his own devices. The detective was just contemplating a second cup of tisane when a sharp rap at the door interrupted his thoughts. His landlady, Mrs. Hudson, entered, bearing a silver tray with a single envelope. "A letter for you, Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice tinged with curiosity. "Delivered by hand, no less. Looks important." Poirot's green eyes gleamed as he took the envelope. It was of fine quality, cream-coloured, with his name written in elegant calligraphy. The wax seal bore an unfamiliar crest, a stag encircled by holly. He broke the seal with care and unfolded the letter, his fingers moving with the precision of a surgeon. The letter read, "My dear Monsieur Poirot, I trust this finds you in good health and spirits. You are cordially invited to join me at Wintervale Manor, my estate in the Yorkshire Dales, for the Christmas festivities, commencing on the 23rd of December. I am Sir Reginald Haverford, and I have recently achieved a discovery, a true Christmas miracle, if I may be so bold, that I believe will intrigue a man of your intellect. Your presence would do us great honour, and I assure you the matter is of utmost significance. A car will collect you at King's Cross Station at 10 a.m. on the 23rd. I eagerly await your arrival. Yours sincerely." Sir Reginald Haverford Poirot's moustache twitched as he read the letter a second time. A Christmas miracle. The phrase was intriguing, if somewhat theatrical. Sir Reginald Haverford was not a name he knew, though Poirot's encyclopedic memory of London's elite suggested the man was a wealthy industrialist, recently knighted for contributions to science. The promise of a discovery piqued Poirot's curiosity, for he was not immune to the lure of a puzzle, even one cloaked in festive rhetoric. He set the letter down and steepled his fingers, his mind already at work. Why him? Why not a scientist or an engineer to witness this so-called miracle? And why the urgency of a hand-delivered invitation? Poirot's grey cells hummed with possibilities. He rose, adjusted his waistcoat, and decided to accept the invitation. After all, a change of scene might stimulate the intellect, and the Yorkshire Dales promised a picturesque, if chilly, backdrop. The journey to King's Cross on the morning of the 23rd was brisk, the air sharp with the scent of pine and coal smoke. Poirot, dressed impeccably in a woolen overcoat and a neatly tied scarf, arrived at the station with his small valise. The platform was a whirl of holiday travellers, their breath visible in the cold. Precisely at 10 a.m., a sleek black car pulled up, its driver a taciturn man in a grey uniform who introduced himself as Jenkins. With a nod, Poirot settled into the plush interior, and the car sped northward through the snow-dusted countryside. The drive was long, and the landscape grew wilder as they entered Yorkshire. Rolling hills gave way to stark moors, blanketed in snow that glittered under a pale sun. Poirot's thoughts wandered to the letter. Sir Reginald's words had been carefully chosen, but there was an undercurrent of urgency, perhaps even unease. Was this miracle a genuine breakthrough, or was it a pretext for something more sinister? Poirot's instincts, honed by years of unravelling human deceit, suggested the latter. Wintervale Manor came into view as the car crested a hill. It was a grand Elizabethan structure of grey stone, its turrets dusted with snow, its windows glowing with the promise of warmth. Holly wreaths adorned the gates, and a towering Christmas tree stood in the courtyard, its ornaments catching the fading light. Yet, despite the festive trappings, there was something austere about the manor, as if it held secrets beneath its holiday cheer. Jenkins opened the car door, and Poirot stepped onto the gravel drive, his polished shoes crunching softly. The front door swung open, revealing a butler with a face as stern as the manor itself. "Monsieur Poirot, welcome to Wintervale," he intoned. "Sir Reginald awaits you in the drawing-room." Poirot followed the butler through a cavernous hall, its walls lined with portraits of stern-faced Haverfords. The air smelled of pine and beeswax, and a distant piano played a soft rendition of Silent Night. The drawing-room was a study in opulence, velvet drapes, a roaring fire, and a table laden with crystal decanters. Sir Reginald Haverford stood by the hearth, a tall man in his 50s with silver hair and a commanding presence. His eyes, however, betrayed a flicker of anxiety. "Monsieur Poirot!" he exclaimed, striding forward to clasp Poirot's hand. "I cannot tell you how delighted I am that you've come. This Christmas promises to be extraordinary." "Merci, Sir Reginald," Poirot replied, his tone polite but probing. "Your invitation was most intriguing. This Christmas miracle, it is perhaps a matter of some delicacy?" Sir Reginald's smile faltered, but he recovered quickly. "All in good time, my dear sir. First, allow me to introduce you to my family and guests. They're eager to meet the famous Hercule, Poirot." As if on cue, the door opened, and a procession of figures entered. There was Lady Eleanor, Sir Reginald's elegant but cold-eyed wife, their son Charles, a brooding young man with a restless air, and their daughter, Beatrice, whose bright smile seemed at odds with the tension in the room. A handful of guests followed. Dr. Mortimer Crane, a scientist with a sharp gaze, Mrs. Lavinia Price, a widowed heiress with a penchant for gossip, and Mr. Victor Langley, a slick businessman who seemed overly interested in Poirot's presence. The introductions were cordial, but Poirot's keen eyes noted the undercurrents. A glance exchanged between Charles and Beatrice, a nervous twitch in Dr. Crane's fingers, the way Mrs. Price's laughter rang just a touch too loud. These were not merely holiday guests. They were players in a drama yet to unfold. As the evening progressed, Sir Reginald regaled the group with tales of his industrial triumphs, hinting at his forthcoming revelation without divulging details. Poirot listened, his mind cataloguing every word, every gesture. The fire crackled, the snow fell silently outside, and the Christmas spirit seemed to hang precariously over Wintervale Manor, like a star atop a fragile tree. Dinner was announced, and the party moved to the dining room, where a feast of roast goose and plum pudding awaited. Yet, as Poirot took his seat, he could not shake the feeling that this festive gathering was a prelude to something far less merry. The Christmas miracle loomed large in his thoughts, but so too did the shadow of something darker, a mystery that would require all his little grey cells to unravel. Chapter 2. Snowbound Arrivals. The snow fell relentlessly as evening deepened over Wintervale Manor, transforming the Yorkshire Dales into a world of white silence. Hercule Poirot stood by a tall window in the grand hall, his sharp green eyes tracing the flakes as they danced in the glow of the manor's lanterns. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of pine from the towering Christmas tree in the courtyard. Inside, the warmth of the manor contrasted sharply with the blizzard outside, yet Poirot sensed a chill that had little to do with the weather. The gathering of guests, so festive on the surface, hummed with unspoken tensions, and Poirot's meticulous mind was already cataloguing every detail. The afternoon had passed in a flurry of arrivals, each guest bringing their own aura of intrigue to Wintervale. After the initial introductions in the drawing-room, Poirot had retreated to observe, his small frame unobtrusive, yet his presence keenly felt. Sir Reginald Haverford, their host, had been effusive, playing the part of the genial patriarch, but his frequent glances toward the window betrayed a nervousness Poirot found curious. Was he anxious about the weather or something more? The manor's great hall was a spectacle of holiday cheer. Garlands of holly and ivy draped the oak-panelled walls, and a chandelier sparkled above, casting light on the portraits of Haverford ancestors. A young maid, her cheeks flushed from the cold, bustled about, lighting candles that filled the room with a golden glow. The butler, Mr. Grayson, moved with the precision of a clock, directing servants to carry luggage and stoke fires. Yet, even in this bustle, Poirot noted the stiffness in Grayson's demeanour, as if he too sensed an undercurrent beneath the festive facade. The guests had arrived in stages, their cars struggling through the thickening snow. First came Miss Clara Dunworthy, a spinster of indeterminate age, with a penchant for knitting and a sharp tongue that belied her demure appearance. She had greeted Poirot with a knowing nod, as if she recognized his reputation, and promptly settled by the fire with her needles clicking rhythmically. Next was Mr. Edmund Blake, a jovial solicitor with a booming laugh, though his eyes darted nervously when Sir Reginald mentioned the miracle to be revealed. Finally, a late arrival, Miss Sophie Laurent, a French artist with an air of bohemian elegance, swept in, her fur-trimmed coat dusted with snow. Her charm was undeniable, but Poirot caught the fleeting glance she exchanged with Charles Haverford, Sir Reginald's son, a look that spoke of familiarity or secrets. Dinner had been a lavish affair, with a table groaning under the weight of mince pies, roasted chestnuts, and a glistening turkey. Sir Reginald presided with enthusiasm, toasting the season and his guests, while Lady Eleanor maintained a poised silence, her gaze occasionally lingering on her husband with an expression Poirot could not quite decipher. Resentment, perhaps, or fear. Charles, seated beside his sister Beatrice, seemed restless, his fingers drumming on the table, while Beatrice's bright chatter about Christmas traditions felt forced, as if masking some deeper unease. Dr. Mortimer Crane, the scientist, ate sparingly, his attention fixed on Sir Reginald, while Mrs. Lavinia Price regaled the table with tales of her late husband's wealth, her laughter grating against the room's tension. Mr. Victor Langley, the businessman, was all smiles. But Poirot noted how his eyes followed every movement, as if calculating. As the meal concluded, Sir Reginald rose, glass in hand. "My friends," he began, his voice rich with anticipation, "tomorrow, on Christmas Eve, I shall unveil a discovery that will astonish you all. A true miracle, born of science and destined to change the world. But tonight, let us revel in the warmth of this season." The guests clapped politely, but Poirot's keen ears caught the murmurs that followed. Clara Dunworthy's needles paused. Edmund Blake coughed into his napkin, and Sophie Laurent's smile tightened. Something about Sir Reginald's announcement had stirred the room, like a stone dropped into still water. After dinner, the party retired to the drawing-room, where a pianoforte stood adorned with bedroom candles. Beatrice offered to play, her fingers coaxing a gentle rendition of "O Come, All You Faithful" from the keys. Poirot, sipping a glass of mulled wine, positioned himself near the fire, observing the group. Charles stood apart, staring out at the snow, his jaw tight. Lady Eleanor excused herself early, claiming a headache, but Poirot noted the way her hand lingered on the doorframe, as if reluctant to leave. Dr. Crane engaged Victor Langley in a hushed conversation about patents, their voices low but intense. Mrs. Price, meanwhile, had cornered Sophie Laurent, probing her about Paris and art, though Sophie's answers were evasive. Poirot's attention was drawn to a small incident that might have gone unnoticed by a less observant eye. As Beatrice finished her song, a servant dropped a tray of glasses, the crash echoing through the room. The maid apologized profusely, but Poirot saw Charles flinch, his hand moving to his pocket as if to check something. Grayson, the butler, swiftly reprimanded the girl, but his eyes flicked towards Sir Reginald, who seemed unperturbed, lost in a conversation with Clara Dunworthy about Yorkshire winters. The moment passed, but Poirot filed it away, his mind already weaving connections. The snow continued to fall, sealing Wintervale Manor in a cocoon of white. Poirot, ever the methodical thinker, considered the logistics. The manor was isolated, the nearest village miles away, and the roads were now impassable. The guests, for better or worse, were trapped together until the storm abated. This isolation, Poirot mused, could be a catalyst for camaraderie or for chaos. He suspected the latter. As the evening drew to a close, Sir Reginald invited Poirot to his study for a private word. The room was a haven of leather-bound books and polished oak, with a large desk bearing a curious object, a small metallic device, no larger than a cigar box, covered with a cloth. Sir Reginald's eyes gleamed as he gestured toward it. "This, Monsieur Poirot, is the heart of my miracle," he said, his voice low. "Tomorrow you shall see its power. But I must confess, I invited you not only for your intellect, but because I trust your discretion. There are forces that might wish to see this discovery suppressed." Poirot's moustache twitched. "Forces, mon ami? You speak of danger." Sir Reginald hesitated, then forced a smile. "Merely a precaution. Enjoy the festivities, Monsieur Poirot. Tomorrow will be a day to remember." As Poirot returned to his room, the manor's corridors silent save for the creak of old wood, he felt the weight of Sir Reginald's words. The Christmas miracle was no mere boast. It was a magnet for envy, greed, or worse. The snowbound manor, with its eclectic cast of characters, was a stage set for a drama Poirot knew would soon unfold. He retired to his bed, but sleep eluded him, his grey cells alive with the puzzle of Wintervale Manor. Chapter 3. The Miracle Unveiled. The morning of December 24th dawned over Wintervale Manor with a stillness that seemed to hush the world. The blizzard had relented, leaving behind a pristine blanket of snow that glittered under a weak sun. Hercule Poirot, ever an early riser, stood at his bedroom window, his breath fogging the glass as he surveyed the untouched expanse. The manor's isolation was complete. No tracks marred the snow, no sound of distant life broke the silence. Yet, within these walls, Poirot sensed a gathering storm, one not of weather, but of human passions. Breakfast was served in the dining room, where the guests assembled amid the clink of porcelain and the aroma of fresh scones. Sir Reginald Haverford, resplendent in a burgundy waistcoat, presided with an air of barely contained excitement. his wife, Lady Eleanor, sat at the opposite end, her face pale but composed, her fingers toying with a silver spoon. Charles and Beatrice, the Haverford heirs, exchanged fleeting glances, while the other guests, Dr. Mortimer Crane, Mrs. Lavinia Price, Mr. Victor Langley, Miss Clara Dunworthy, Mr. Edmund Blake, and Miss Sophie Laurent, filled the room with polite chatter that did little to mask the undercurrents of anticipation. Poirot, seated between Clara and Sophie, observed the scene with his usual meticulousness. Clara's knitting needles lay idle beside her plate, a rare occurrence, and her sharp eyes darted towards Sir Reginald. Sophie, meanwhile, sipped her tea with a studied calm, though Poirot noted the slight tremor in her hand. Dr. Crane, ever the scientist, scribbled notes on a napkin, his brow furrowed. The atmosphere was festive, yet fragile, like a glass ornament poised to shatter. As the meal concluded, Sir Reginald rose, tapping his glass with a spoon. The room fell silent, all eyes upon him. "My dear friends," he began, his voice resonant with conviction, "today is Christmas Eve, a day of hope and miracles, and it is my privilege to share with you a discovery that will redefine our future. A true Christmas miracle, born of science and ingenuity." He gestured toward the butler, Grayson, who entered carrying the mysterious device Poirot had glimpsed in the study the previous night. It was a compact metallic contraption, no larger than a bread box, adorned with dials and a small glass panel. Grayson placed it on a sideboard, and Sir Reginald removed the cloth covering it with a flourish. The guests leaned forward, their curiosity palpable. "This," Sir Reginald declared, "is the Haverford kinetic generator. It harnesses the energy of motion in a manner never before achieved, producing power without fuel, without waste, a gift to humanity that could end our reliance on coal and oil." His eyes gleamed with fervour. "Imagine a world where every home, every village is lit and warmed by a device no larger than this. A miracle indeed." A murmur rippled through the room. Dr. Crane's pen froze, his expression a mix of scepticism and intrigue. Victor Langley's smile was tight, his fingers drumming on the table. Mrs. Price gasped theatrically, while Clara Dunworthy muttered something about fanciful nonsense. Sophie Laurent's gaze lingered on the device, her lips parting slightly, as if in recognition. Charles and Beatrice exchanged another glance, this one heavy with unspoken meaning. Poirot, his moustache twitching, studied the device. It was sleek, almost too perfect, its purpose shrouded in just enough mystery to provoke questions. He noted Sir Reginald's careful phrasing, bold claims yet no demonstration. Was this a genuine breakthrough, or a theatrical ploy? And why reveal it to such an eclectic group, rather than to investors or scientists? Sir Reginald continued, undeterred by the mixed reactions. "Tomorrow on Christmas Day, I shall demonstrate its capabilities, but for now, let us prepare for tonight's festivities, a grand Christmas Eve ball to celebrate this moment." The announcement elicited polite applause, though Poirot sensed the guests' minds were elsewhere, already turning over the implications of the kinetic generator. As the group dispersed, Poirot lingered, his eyes on the device as Grayson covered it once more. Sir Reginald approached, his smile warm but strained. "What do you think, Monsieur Poirot? A marvel, is it not?" "It is most intriguing, mon ami," Poirot replied, his tone neutral. "But tell me, why share such a secret with this particular assembly? Are they all trustworthy?" Sir Reginald's smile faltered. "They are my family and friends, Monsieur Poirot, and some, like Dr. Crane, have the expertise to appreciate its significance. I trust you, above all, to understand its value and to guard against any misunderstandings. Poirot inclined his head, his mind racing. The word guard was telling. Did Sir Reginald fear theft, sabotage, or something darker? The detective's grey cells were already at work, piecing together the puzzle of motives and opportunities. The day passed in a flurry of preparations for the Christmas Eve ball. Servants bustled about, hanging mistletoe and polishing silver, while the guests scattered to their rooms or the manor's many parlours. Poirot took the opportunity to explore, his small, precise steps carrying him through Wintervale's labyrinthine corridors. The manor was a treasure trove of history, its walls lined with tapestries and artifacts, but Poirot's interest lay in the present. He noted the locked door to Sir Reginald's study, the faint scuff marks on the floor near the library, and the curious absence of footprints in the snow beneath certain windows. In the library, he found Dr. Crane poring over a technical journal, his face a mask of concentration. "Monsieur Poirot," Crane said, looking up, "what do you make of Sir Reginald's claims? A generator without fuel. Sounds like alchemy to me." Poirot smiled faintly. "The impossible often conceals the possible, Doctor. But tell me, do you believe it feasible?" Crane hesitated, then shrugged. "In theory, perhaps, but I'd need to see it in action. Sir Reginald's been cagey about the details." Their conversation was interrupted by Mrs. Price, who swept in with a rustle of silk. "Oh, Monsieur Poirot, isn't it thrilling? A miracle machine, though I dare say it's caused a stir. Young Charles looked positively green at breakfast." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Green, you say?" Perhaps the turkey did not agree with him. Mrs. Price laughed, but her gossip confirmed Poirot's suspicions. Tensions were rising, and the kinetic generator was the catalyst. He excused himself and continued his observations, noting Charles's absence from the common areas, and Beatrice's strained smiles as she helped decorate the ballroom. As evening approached, the manor transformed into a vision of Christmas splendour. The ballroom glowed with candlelight, its chandeliers sparkling like stars. Guests donned their finest attire. Poirot himself wore an impeccably tailored suit, his moustache waxed to perfection. The orchestra struck up a waltz, and the air filled with laughter and the clink of champagne glasses. Yet, beneath the merriment, Poirot sensed a growing unease. Lady Eleanor moved stiffly, her eyes avoiding her husband. Sophie Laurent danced with Charles, their steps too intimate for mere acquaintances. Victor Langley watched the room like a hawk, while Clara Dunworthy's knitting resumed, her needles clicking like a metronome of suspicion. As the clock neared midnight, Sir Reginald took the floor, raising a toast, "To miracles, to Christmas, and to a future bright with promise." The guests echoed his words, but Poirot's sharp ears caught a dissonant note. A faint creak from the upper floors, unnoticed by the revellers. His gaze flickered to the ceiling, then to the faces around him. Someone, he sensed, was not where they should be. The stage was set, the players in place. The Christmas miracle had been unveiled, but Poirot knew that miracles often hid darker truths. As the ball continued, he remained vigilant, his grey cells poised for the moment when the festive mask would slip, revealing the shadow of murder. Chapter 4. Festive Shadows. The Christmas Eve ball at Wintervale Manor glittered with a deceptive brilliance, the candlelight casting long shadows that danced across the polished oak floors. Hercule Poirot, ever the observer, stood near a towering fir adorned with glass baubles, his keen eyes scanning the whirl of dancers. The orchestra played a lively carol, and the guests, clad in silks and velvets, moved with the practised grace of the season. Yet, beneath the festive veneer, Poirot sensed a current of unease, like a discordant note in a familiar melody. The unveiling of Sir Reginald Haverford's kinetic generator had stirred something in the manor. Envy, perhaps, or fear. And the shadows of old grudges were beginning to lengthen. The ballroom was a spectacle of holiday splendour. Mistletoe hung above arched doorways, and garlands of holly framed the windows, through which the snow continued to fall, sealing the manor in its icy embrace. Poirot sipped his champagne, the bubbles sharp on his tongue, and noted the subtle interactions among the guests. Sir Reginald, resplendent in a tailored evening suit, circulated with a host's charm, but his laughter rang hollow, his eyes darting toward the locked door of his study, where the kinetic generator rested. Lady Eleanor, elegant in emerald satin, maintained a brittle smile, her gaze avoiding her husband's. Their children, Charles and Beatrice, danced together briefly, their steps stiff, as if bound by obligation rather than affection. Poirot's attention was drawn to the other guests, each a piece in the puzzle of Wintervale. Dr. Mortimer Crane, the scientist, stood apart, his sharp features etched with scepticism as he watched Sir Reginald. Victor Langley, the businessman, moved through the crowd with a predator's ease, his smiles calculated, his words laced with questions about the generator's potential profits. Mrs. Lavinia Price, her voice carrying over the music, regaled a small group with tales of her late husband's investments, though her eyes followed Charles with a gossip's curiosity. Miss Clara Dunworthy sat in a corner, her knitting needles clicking rhythmically, her lips pursed as if she disapproved of the revelry. Miss Sophie Laurent, the French artist, glided across the dance floor with an effortless grace, but Poirot noted the way her hand lingered on Charles's arm, a gesture too intimate for mere acquaintance. As the evening wore on, Poirot's meticulous mind catalogued these details, his grey cells weaving connections. The kinetic generator, with its promise of limitless energy, was more than a scientific marvel. It was a catalyst for human passions. Greed, ambition, resentment, all simmered beneath the surface, waiting for a spark. Poirot's instincts, honed by years of unravelling mysteries, told him that spark was near. A small incident broke his reverie. A young footman, carrying a tray of crystal flutes, stumbled near the fireplace, nearly spilling his load. The guests laughed, but Poirot's eyes narrowed. The footman's clumsiness seemed forced, his glance toward Grayson, the butler, too deliberate. Grayson, ever the model of decorum, swiftly corrected the lad, but Poirot caught the fleeting tension in his posture. Was it merely the strain of managing a grand event, or something more? The detective filed the moment away, his suspicion growing that the manor's staff, too, held secrets. Poirot decided to test the waters. Approaching Mrs. Price, who was fanning herself dramatically, he offered a polite smile. "Madame, you seem most enchanted by the evening. Tell me, what do you make of Sir Reginald's miracle?" Mrs. Price's eyes lit up, eager for gossip. "Oh, Monsieur Poirot, it's all terribly exciting, isn't it? A machine that powers the world, but I dare say it's caused a stir. Poor Lady Eleanor looked positively ill when Sir Reginald spoke of it. And Charles, well, he's been in a foul mood all day. I wonder if he's jealous of his father's success." Poirot's moustache twitched. "Jealousy, madame? A most interesting observation. And what of the others? Mr. Langley, perhaps? Or Dr. Crane?" Mrs. Price leaned closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Langley's sniffing around like a hound, asking about patents and profits. As for Dr. Crane, He's been muttering about scientific impossibilities. If you ask me, they're all green with envy." Poirot nodded, his mind racing. Envy was a powerful motive, but so too was fear, of exposure, of loss, of failure. He excused himself and approached Beatrice, who stood alone by a window, her reflection pale against the dark glass. "Mademoiselle, you seem pensive," he said gently. "Is the Christmas spirit not to your liking?" Beatrice started, then offered a brittle smile. "Oh, Monsieur Poirot, it's a lovely evening. I'm just tired. Father's announcement has everyone on edge. It's such a grand claim, don't you think?" "Grand indeed," Poirot agreed. "But tell me, does this miracle bring joy to your family or concern?" Her eyes flickered, and for a moment Poirot thought she might confide something, but she merely shrugged. "It's Father's dream. We all want him to succeed." Her words were careful, too careful, and Poirot noted the way her fingers twisted the ribbon of her gown. The clock struck 11, and the ball reached its peak, the music swelling as couples spun across the floor. Poirot, however, felt the atmosphere shift. Sir Reginald, who had been mingling, suddenly excused himself, his face pale as he slipped towards a study. Lady Eleanor watched him go, her lips tightening. Charles, too, broke away from Sophie and followed his father, his stride purposeful. Poirot's instincts prickled. Something was afoot. He moved discreetly toward the corridor, his small frame blending into the shadows. The study door was ajar, and low voices drifted out. Sir Reginald's, sharp with urgency, and Charles's, laced with anger. "You can't keep this up, father," Charles was saying. "It's madness, dangerous madness." "Mind your place, boy," Sir Reginald retorted. "This is my legacy, not yours to question." Poirot retreated before he was noticed, his mind buzzing. A family rift, perhaps, over the generator? Or something deeper, rooted in the past? He returned to the ballroom just as the orchestra struck up. God rest you merry, gentlemen, the irony not lost on him. As midnight approached, the guests gathered for a final toast. Sir Reginald reappeared, his composure restored, though Poirot noted the faint sheen of sweat on his brow. He raised his glass, his voice booming. "To Christmas, to miracles, and to the future." The guests echoed the toast, but Poirot's eyes were on the faces. Clara's pursed lips, Langley's calculating stare, Sophie's fleeting glance at Charles. The festive shadows were growing darker, and Poirot knew the night was far from over. The clock began to chime midnight, its solemn tolls echoing through the manor. And then, from the upper floors, came a sound that froze the revelry. A sharp, unmistakable scream, followed by a heavy thud. The music stopped, glasses clinked as they were set down, and the guests turned toward the sound, their faces pale. Poirot's heart quickened, his grey cells alive with certainty. The spark had ignited, and the mystery of Wintervale Manor was about to unfold. Chapter 5. The Midnight Strike. The chime of midnight reverberated through Wintervale Manor, each toll a solemn prelude to the chaos that followed. The scream, sharp, piercing, and unmistakably human, had shattered the festive glow of the Christmas Eve ball. Hercule Poirot, standing near the ballroom's grand fireplace, felt the air thicken with dread as the guests froze, their glasses suspended mid-toast. The thud that followed, heavy and ominous, seemed to echo from the upper floors, where the shadows of the manor held their deepest secrets. Poirot's green eyes gleamed, his mind already racing toward the inevitable conclusion. Murder had struck Wintervale. The guests erupted into a flurry of gasps and murmurs. Lady Eleanor Haverford clutched the arm of a nearby chair, her face ashen. Beatrice, her eyes wide with fear, grasped her brother Charles's sleeve, but Charles's expression was unreadable, his jaw tight. Dr. Mortimer Crane pushed his spectacles up his nose, his scientific curiosity warring with unease. Victor Langley's smile had vanished, replaced by a calculating stare, while Mrs. Lavinia Price's hand fluttered to her throat, her gossip silenced for once. Miss Clara Dunworthy's knitting needles clattered to the floor, and Miss Sophie Laurent, the French artist, stood motionless, her gaze fixed on the ceiling. Poirot, ever the master of order in chaos, moved swiftly toward the staircase, his small frame cutting through the crowd with surprising authority. "Mes amis, remain calm," he said, his voice steady but commanding. "We must ascertain the source of this disturbance. Monsieur Grayson, lead the way." The butler, Grayson, hesitated only a moment before nodding, his stern face betraying a flicker of alarm. He seized a candelabrum from a nearby table, its flames casting eerie shadows on the oak-panelled walls, and led Poirot and a small group, Charles, Beatrice, Dr. Crane, and Victor Langley, up the grand staircase. The other guests hovered below, their whispers a low hum of fear and speculation. The upper corridor was dark, save for the faint glow of wall sconces. The air was colder here, carrying the scent of wax and old wood. Grayson paused, outside a heavy door at the end of the hall. Sir Reginald's study. The scream, Poirot deduced, had come from this direction. He noted the door was slightly ajar, a sliver of light spilling onto the floor. Grayson pushed it open, and the group stepped inside, only to freeze at the sight before them. Sir Reginald Haverford lay sprawled on the Persian rug, his eyes staring blankly at the ceiling. A crimson stain spread across his white shirt front, the hilt of a letter opener protruding from his chest. The kinetic generator, his so-called Christmas miracle, sat untouched on the desk, its dials glinting in the firelight. The room's single window was locked, its latch secure, and beyond it, the snow outside was pristine, unbroken by footprints. The scene was impossible, a murder in a locked room sealed by nature itself. Poirot's moustache twitched as he surveyed the scene, his grey cells alight with the challenge. "Mon Dieu," he murmured, stepping forward with the precision of a surgeon. "A tragedy most foul. Monsieur Grayson, ensure no one enters or leaves this room. We must preserve the scene." Charles, his face pale, pushed past Grayson. "Father!" he cried, kneeling beside the body. But Poirot raised a hand. "Non, Monsieur Charles, do not touch. Every detail is vital." Charles froze, his hands trembling, while Beatrice stifled a sob, clinging to the doorframe. Dr. Crane, ever the scientist, peered at the body, his voice clinical. Stabbed straight to the heart. Death would have been near instantaneous, but how? The door was locked, and the window, précisément. Poirot interjected, his eyes scanning the room. The study was a fortress of order. Books neatly shelved, papers stacked precisely on the desk, the fire burning low in the hearth. The letter opener, an ornate piece with a silver handle, was an unlikely but effective weapon. Poirot noted its position, driven deep, with no signs of a struggle. Sir Reginald's face bore no expression of surprise, only a frozen calm, as if death had caught him unawares. Victor Langley, his voice low, muttered, "This is madness! Who could have done this? We were all downstairs." His eyes darted toward the generator, and Poirot caught the flicker of greed beneath his shock. Beatrice, her voice trembling, whispered, "The scream! It was father, wasn't it? But how did anyone get in? The snow! There's no trace outside." Poirot knelt beside the body, his gloved fingers hovering over the wound without touching it. The absence of footprints is most curious, mademoiselle. But the little grey cells, they do not rest. They see what the eyes cannot. He rose, his gaze sweeping the room. The window's latch was old but intact, the glass unmarred. The door's lock, he confirmed with a quick inspection, showed no signs of tampering. Yet a faint draught brushed his cheek, and he turned toward the fireplace, his eyes narrowing. Grayson, standing rigidly by the door, cleared his throat. "Monsieur Poirot, shall I summon the authorities? Though, with the snow, it may be hours before they arrive." Poirot nodded. "Do so, but first we must secure the manor. No one leaves, no one enters. And monsieur, who has keys to this study?" Grayson hesitated. "Only Sir Reginald, myself, and Lady Eleanor. The spare key is kept in my quarters." "Bon," Poirot said, filing the information away. He turned to the group, his voice calm but piercing. "Mes amis, a crime has been committed, and the answer lies within these walls. I, Hercule Poirot, will uncover it. Return to the ballroom, but do not speak of this to the others, not yet." As the group filed out, their faces a mix of shock and suspicion, Poirot lingered, his eyes lingering on the kinetic generator. Was it the motive for this murder, or a distraction? He noted a faint smudge on the desk, barely visible, a trace of ash perhaps, or something else. The fireplace, too, held his attention. A single log seemed out of place, its position too neat for a fire that had burned low. Downstairs, the guests had gathered in the ballroom, their festive mood shattered. Lady Eleanor stood by the pianoforte, her hands clasped tightly, while Mrs. Price whispered frantically to Clara Dunworthy. Sophie Laurent sat alone, her eyes red-rimmed, and Poirot wondered if her tears were for Sir Reginald or for something more personal. The orchestra had fallen silent, and the air was thick with fear. Poirot addressed the room, his voice cutting through the murmurs. "Mesdames et messieurs, a tragedy has occurred. Sir Reginald is dead, murdered in his study. Until the authorities arrive, I ask for your cooperation. No one must leave the manor." A gasp rippled through the crowd, followed by a cacophony of questions. Mrs. Price's voice rose above the rest. "Murdered? But how? We were all here." Clara's needles resumed their clicking, a nervous rhythm, while Victor Langley's eyes narrowed, as if calculating his next move. Poirot raised a hand for silence. "The how and the why, these I shall discover. For now, remain here. The truth, it will not hide from Hercule Poirot." As the guests settled into uneasy silence, Poirot's mind churned. The locked room, the untouched snow, the generator's looming presence, all pointed to an impossible crime. Yet Poirot knew there was no such thing as impossible, only the unseen. The midnight strike had set the stage, and the detectives' grey cells were ready to unravel the mystery of Wintervale Manor. Chapter 6. Poirot's Grey Cells. Awakened, the air in Wintervale Manor had grown heavy, the festive warmth of Christmas Eve replaced by a chill that seeped into the bones. The ballroom, once alive with music and laughter, now held a sombre gathering. The guests huddled in small groups, their whispers sharp with fear and suspicion. Hercule Poirot stood at the centre, his small frame commanding despite the chaos. Sir Reginald, Haverford's murder, a dagger to the heart in a locked study, with no footprints in the snow outside, had cast a pall over the manor, and Poirot's grey cells were alight with the challenge of unravelling this impossible crime. The detective had returned to the study, now a silent shrine to the tragedy. The fire in the hearth had dwindled to embers, casting flickering shadows across Sir Reginald's lifeless form. The kinetic generator, the so-called Christmas miracle, sat untouched on the desk, its metallic surface glinting under the candlelight. Poirot's green eyes swept the room with surgical precision, noting every detail. The locked window, the unmarred snow beyond, the letter opener embedded in Sir Reginald's chest, and the faint smudge of ash on the desk he had observed earlier. The door's lock, he confirmed, was intact, its key still in Sir Reginald's pocket. The scene was a puzzle, and Poirot relished its complexity. He began his examination with the body, kneeling carefully to avoid disturbing the scene. Sir Reginald's face, frozen in a calm expression, suggested no struggle, a curious detail for a man stabbed in the heart. The letter opener, ornate and silver-handled, was an unlikely weapon, yet its placement was deliberate, driven deep with a single forceful blow. Poirot's gloved fingers hovered over the wound, noting the angle. "Curieux," he murmured. "The strike, it is precise, yet not frantic. The killer, they knew their target well." Rising, he turned to the window. The latch was old but secure, the glass unblemished. He pressed a finger to the frame, feeling for draughts, but found none. The snow outside, visible through the frosted panes, was pristine, its surface unbroken by even a single footprint. "Impossible, no?" Poirot mused, his moustache twitching. "But the impossible, it is merely a trick of the mind." His attention shifted to the fireplace. The embers glowed faintly, but one log, as he had noted before, seemed out of place, its position too neat, as if recently adjusted. He crouched, peering into the hearth. A faint trace of soot marked the edge of the firebox, and a single charred scrap of paper lay among the ashes. With a delicate touch, he retrieved it, using a pair of tweezers from his pocket. The fragment bore a few legible words of agreement, Haverford, trust. Poirot's eyes gleamed. A contract, perhaps? Or a betrayal? He slipped the fragment into a small envelope, his mind already weaving possibilities. The kinetic generator drew his gaze next. He circled the desk, noting its untouched state. No fingerprints, no smudges, save the faint ash he had seen earlier. The device's dials and glass panel were pristine, but Poirot sensed it was more than a scientific marvel. Was it the motive for murder, or a distraction? He resisted the urge to touch it, knowing its secrets would reveal themselves in time. Leaving the study, Poirot instructed Grayson to guard the door and descended to the ballroom, where the guests awaited, their faces a tapestry of shock and suspicion. Lady Eleanor sat rigidly, her hands clasped, her eyes avoiding the others. Charles paced near the pianoforte, his fists clenched, while Beatrice hovered nearby, her face pale. Dr. Mortimer Crane scribbled in a notebook, his scientific detachment a stark contrast to Mrs. Lavinia Price's nervous chatter. Victor Langley leaned against a wall, his gaze calculating, while Miss Clara Dunworthy's knitting needles clicked with renewed vigour. Miss Sophie Laurent sat apart, her eyes red but dry, her expression unreadable. Poirot addressed the group, his voice calm but authoritative. "Mesdames et messieurs, the murder of Sir Reginald is a crime most perplexing, but not unsolvable. I, Hercule Poirot, require your cooperation. Tell me, who last saw Sir Reginald alive, and where?" A tense silence followed. Beatrice spoke first, her voice trembling. "Father was in the ballroom just before midnight. He said he needed to check something in his study." Charles nodded, his tone curt. "I saw him go upstairs, but I didn't follow. I was dancing with Sophie." His eyes flicked to the artist, who looked away. Dr. Crane cleared his throat. "I spoke with him around 11, about the generator. He seemed preoccupied, but he wouldn't say why." Poirot's gaze lingered on each speaker, noting their hesitations, their glances. And the scream! Who heard it, And where were you?" Mrs. Price raised a trembling hand. "I was near the refreshment table. It came from upstairs, I'm sure of it. So chilling." Clara Dunworthy's needles paused. "I was by the fire. The scream was faint but unmistakable. I thought it was a servant at first." Poirot nodded, his mind cataloguing their accounts. The timeline was tight. Sir Reginald had left the ballroom just before midnight, and the scream had coincided with the clock's chimes. The locked study and untouched snow suggested no one had entered or left, yet someone had struck the fatal blow. "Merci," he said. "I shall speak with each of you in turn. For now, remain here." He began with Grayson, pulling the butler aside. "Monsieur Grayson, you hold the spare key to the study. Where was it at the time of the murder?" Grayson's face remained impassive. "In my quarters, locked in a drawer. I checked it this morning. It was undisturbed." "And the staff? Any unusual behaviour?" Grayson hesitated. "The footman Thomas was clumsy tonight. Dropped a tray during the ball. He's young, easily flustered." Poirot's eyes gleamed. The same footman he had noticed earlier. "Bon, I shall speak with him later." Next he approached Lady Eleanor, whose composure was fraying. "Madame, your husband spoke of forces opposing his miracle. Did he confide in you?" Her lips tightened. "Reginald was secretive about his work. He said it would secure our future, but he was anxious. He mentioned a letter, something about an old debt." Poirot filed this away, his mind returning to the charred scrap of paper. An old debt could mean many things, financial, personal, or vengeful. He moved through the guests, each conversation revealing fragments of the puzzle. Charles admitted to arguing with his father about the generator's risks, but claimed he'd returned to the ballroom. Sophie confirmed dancing with Charles, but her evasive answers about their relationship piqued Poirot's interest. Victor Langley spoke of the generator's commercial potential, his ambition thinly veiled, while Dr. Crane's skepticism bordered on disdain, hinting at professional rivalry. As the hours ticked toward dawn, Poirot returned to the study, alone this time. He stood by the fireplace, his fingers tracing the mantel. The charred paper, the misplaced log, the smudge of ash, these were not accidents. Someone had been in this room, someone clever enough to stage an impossible crime. The kinetic generator loomed in his thoughts, but so too did the human heart, its greed, its secrets, its capacity for betrayal. Poirot's grey cells were fully awake now, piecing together the threads of motive and opportunity. The midnight strike had been no random act, but a calculated move in a game of deception. As the manor slept uneasily, Poirot knew the truth was within his grasp, waiting for the light of his intellect to reveal it. Chapter 7. Interrogations by the Fire. The fire in Wintervale Manor's drawing-room crackled softly, casting a warm glow over the sombre gathering. The clock had long since passed the early hours of Christmas morning, yet sleep eluded the guests, their faces etched with the strain of Sir Reginald Haverford's murder. The impossible crime, a dagger to the heart in a locked study with no footprints in the snow, had transformed the festive manor into a crucible of suspicion. Hercule Poirot, seated in a high-backed chair by the hearth, sipped a steaming cup of tisane, his green eyes sharp as he prepared to probe the secrets of those around him. The little grey cells, now fully awake, demanded answers, and Poirot intended to extract them with the precision of a maestro conducting a symphony. The guests forbidden to leave the manor due to the snowbound roads had gathered reluctantly in the drawing-room at Poirot's request. The air was thick with the scent of mulled wine and pine. but the festive trappings, holly garlands, flickering candles, seemed mocking in the wake of tragedy. Lady Eleanor sat rigidly on a velvet settee, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Charles paced near a window, his shadow flickering against the frost-covered panes. Beatrice hovered by the pianoforte, her fingers tracing its keys without sound. Dr. Mortimer Crane, his notebook abandoned, stared into the fire, while Victor Langley leaned against a bookcase, his eyes darting between faces. Mrs. Lavinia Price fanned herself nervously, her usual chatter subdued, and Miss Clara Dunworthy's knitting needles clicked with a relentless rhythm. Miss Sophie Laurent, the French artist, sat apart, her face pale but composed, her hands clasped around a glass of untouched wine. Poirot rose, his small frame commanding the room's attention. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice calm but resonant, "a crime most heinous has been committed. Sir Reginald is dead, and the truth lies among us. I, Hercule Poirot, will uncover it, but I require your candour. Let us speak plainly by the fire, and let the light of truth dispel these shadows." He began with Lady Eleanor, his tone gentle but probing. "Madame, your husband spoke of a letter, an old debt. What did he mean?" Lady Eleanor's eyes flickered, but she met his gaze. "Reginald was always secretive about his past. He mentioned a letter last week, something from years ago, a business deal gone wrong. He said it was nothing to worry about, but he was distracted." Poirot nodded, his mind returning to the charred scrap of paper in the study. "And this debt, did it involve anyone here?" Her lips tightened. "He didn't say, but he was anxious about the generator's unveiling. He feared someone might try to steal it." Poirot's moustache twitched. Theft or murder? He turned to Charles, who stopped pacing to face him. "Monsieur Charles, you argued with your father before his death. What was the nature of this disagreement?" Charles's jaw clenched, his eyes flashing. "It was about the generator. I told him it was risky, unproven. He was obsessed, pouring everything into it. I thought he was being reckless, that's all." "And yet," Poirot said softly, "you were seen following him toward the study before midnight. Did you enter?" Charles flushed. "No, I went to my room. I didn't see him again until we found him." Beatrice interjected, her voice trembling. "Charles wouldn't hurt father, Monsieur Poirot. He was upset, yes, but he loved him." Poirot's gaze softened, but his mind was unrelenting. "Mademoiselle Beatrice, your loyalty is admirable, but tell me, what did you see when you last spoke with your father?" Beatrice hesitated, her fingers twisting a lace handkerchief. "He was excited about the ball, but nervous. He kept looking at the study door, as if expecting someone." Poirot filed this away, turning to Dr. Crane. "Monsieur le Docteur, you doubted the generator's feasibility. Did Sir Reginald confide in you about its workings?" Crane adjusted his spectacles, his tone clipped. "He showed me diagrams, but they were incomplete. I told him it defied known physics. He insisted it worked, but refused to demonstrate it. Frankly, I thought he was bluffing." A murmur rippled through the room, and Poirot's eyes gleamed. A bluff, or a secret worth killing for? He moved to Victor Langley, whose smile was too smooth. "Monsieur Langley, you spoke of the generator's commercial potential. Did you seek to acquire it?" Langley shrugged, his voice casual. "I saw an opportunity, sure. Reginald was open to investors, but he was cagey about terms. I didn't press him, not yet." Mrs. Price, unable to contain herself, leaned forward. "Oh, Monsieur Poirot, everyone was talking about that machine. I heard Charles say it would ruin the family, and Sophie, well, She seemed awfully interested in it too. Sophie's head snapped up, her eyes flashing. That's absurd. I'm an artist, not a scientist. I was curious, nothing more. Poirot's gaze lingered on her. Mademoiselle Laurent, you danced with Monsieur Charles. Your familiarity suggests a connection. Did you discuss the generator with him? Sophie's cheeks flushed, but she held his gaze. Charles and I are friends. We spoke of many things, but not the generator. I swear it. Clara Dunworthy's needles paused, her voice sharp. Friends, indeed. I saw you whispering with Charles in the garden yesterday, Miss Laurent. Looked like more than friendly chatter. Sophie's lips parted, but she said nothing, and Poirot noted the tension in her posture. He turned to Clara. Mademoiselle Dunworthy, your observations are most acute. What else have you seen? Clara's eyes narrowed. I see more than most. The footman, Thomas, was skulking about last night near the study. And Grayson's been jumpy, checking that spare key of his too often. Poirot's mind seized on this. The footman again, and the butler's key. He made a mental note to question the staff further. For now, he addressed the group. Merci. Your words paint a picture, but it is incomplete. The truth lies in the details. The ash on the desk, the log in the fire, the locked room. I shall find it. As the guests dispersed, their alibis and accusations swirling in his mind, Poirot remained by the fire, its warmth a stark contrast to the cold mystery before him. He recalled the study's details. The charred paper fragment, agreement, Haverford, trust, the misplaced log, the absence of footprints. The generator loomed large, but so did the human heart, its greed, its secrets, its betrayals. He summoned Grayson privately, his tone deceptively mild. Monsieur Grayson, the footman Thomas, his clumsiness last night was notable. Where was he at midnight? Grayson's face remained impassive. Thomas was serving in the ballroom, but he slipped away briefly, said he felt ill. He was back before the scream. And the spare key? Poirot pressed. Still in my quarters, locked away. I checked it after the incident. Poirot nodded, dismissing him. Thomas's absence, however brief, was a thread to tug. He then sought the footman, a nervous lad of 19, who fidgeted under Poirot's gaze. Monsieur Thomas, you were near the study last night. Why? Thomas paled. I was fetching more wine, sir. I didn't go in, I swear. Poirot's eyes bore into him. And yet, you dropped a tray earlier. Nerves, perhaps, or guilt. The boy stammered, but Poirot let him go, his suspicions deepening. The fire's glow illuminated his thoughts as he pieced together the puzzle. The locked room, the generator, the hidden grudges, all pointed to a killer among them, clever and ruthless. The interrogations had revealed much, but the truth remained just out of reach, waiting for Poirot's grey cells to bring it into the light. Chapter 8. Buried Secrets in the Snow. The pale light of Christmas morning crept through the frost-etched windows of Wintervale Manor, casting a ghostly glow over the snowbound estate. The festive cheer that had once filled the halls was now a distant memory, replaced by a pervasive dread that clung to the air like frost. Sir Reginald Haverford's murder, a dagger to the heart in a locked study with no footprints in the snow, had turned the manor into a labyrinth of suspicion. Hercule Poirot, his green eyes sharp and his moustache impeccably groomed, stood in the grand hall, his mind a whirl of deductions. The interrogations by the fire had revealed fragments of truth, but the heart of the mystery remained buried, like secrets in the snow. The guests confined by the blizzard and Poirot's orders moved through the manor with the wariness of caged animals. The drawing-room, where they had gathered after breakfast, was a tableau of strained faces. Lady Eleanor, her composure fraying; Charles, his eyes shadowed with grief or guilt; Beatrice, clutching a rosary; Dr. Mortimer Crane, scribbling furiously in his notebook; Victor Langley, his smile replaced by a calculating frown; Mrs. Lavinia Price, her gossip muted; Miss Clara Dunworthy, her knitting relentless; and Miss Sophie Laurent, her elegance marred by a haunted look. The butler, Grayson, and the footman Thomas hovered at the edges, their presence a reminder of the manor's hidden undercurrents. Poirot had spent the early hours revisiting the study, his grey cells probing the impossible. The locked door, the secure window, the pristine snow, the charred paper fragment, agreement, Haverford, trust, the misplaced log in the fireplace, all pointed to a meticulously planned crime. The kinetic generator, Sir Reginald's Christmas miracle, loomed large, but Poirot sensed it was a piece of a larger puzzle, one rooted in the manor's past. He resolved to dig deeper, to unearth the secrets buried beneath the festive facade. His first task was to explore the manor's library, a cavernous room lined with leather-bound tomes and faded portraits. The air smelled of dust and wax, and a single window overlooked the snow-covered courtyard. Poirot's keen eyes scanned the shelves, seeking anything that might illuminate Sir Reginald's past. He found it in a locked drawer of an oak desk, which he opened with a hairpin from his pocket, a skill honed in less conventional cases. Inside was a bundle of letters, yellowed with age, tied with a faded ribbon. The topmost letter, dated a decade earlier, was addressed to Sir Reginald from a man named Arthur Whitmore. Its tone was bitter. "You betrayed our trust, Haverford. The patent was mine, and you stole it. I'll not forget." Poirot's moustache twitched. A stolen patent? A motive for vengeance, perhaps? He pocketed the letter, intending to confront Lady Eleanor about this Arthur Whitmore. But before he left the library, he noticed a small dusty ledger tucked behind a row of books. Its pages detailed Wintervale's finances, revealing a troubling truth. The manor was heavily mortgaged, and Sir Reginald had sunk vast sums into the kinetic generator. Was the miracle a desperate bid to save the family fortune, or a facade to mask deeper troubles? Next, Poirot sought out Grayson, the butler, whose stoic demeanour hid a wealth of knowledge about the manor's history. In the pantry, amid shelves of polished silver, Poirot questioned him. "Monsieur Grayson, tell me of Arthur Whitmore. He was known to Sir Reginald, n'est-ce pas?" Grayson's eyes flickered, but he answered evenly. Whitmore was Sir Reginald's business partner years ago. They worked on mechanical inventions, but parted ways after a dispute. Whitmore died shortly after, I believe, pneumonia, they said. Poirot nodded, his mind noting the coincidence. And the staff? Any connections to Whitmore, or to the generator? Grayson hesitated. The footman, Thomas, is new, hired last month. His references were vague, but he's a local lad, no ties to Whitmore as far as I know. Poirot dismissed him, his suspicions deepening. Thomas's clumsiness, his absence at midnight, could he be more than a nervous servant? The detective made a mental note to investigate further. Returning to the drawing-room, Poirot approached Lady Eleanor, who sat alone staring at the fire. "Madam, a word about Arthur Whitmore. He accused your husband of betrayal. What do you know of this?" Her hands trembled, but she met his gaze. Arthur was Reginald's partner in their youth. They designed machinery together, but Reginald patented their best work under his own name. Arthur never forgave him. He died penniless, and his family, they suffered. Poirot's eyes gleamed. And this family, do any remain? Lady Eleanor hesitated. A daughter, I believe. She was young when Arthur died. Reginald tried to make amends, but she refused his help. A daughter. Poirot's mind raced. Could Sophie Laurent, with her mysterious familiarity with Charles, be connected? He thanked Lady Eleanor and moved to question Sophie, who stood by a window, her reflection pale against the snow. Mademoiselle Laurent, your interest in Charles Haverford is evident. Tell me, do you know of Arthur Whitmore? Sophie's eyes widened, but she recovered quickly. Whitmore? No, I'm an artist, Monsieur Poirot. My connection to Charles is personal, not professional. Her denial was too swift, and Poirot noted the flush in her cheeks. He let the matter drop, but his suspicions grew. A visit to the servants' quarters yielded another clue. Thomas, the footman, had a photograph in his room. A young girl with Sophie's features, labelled Clara Whitmore. The pieces were falling into place. As noon approached, Poirot gathered the guests in the drawing-room, his voice cutting through their murmurs. Mesdames et messieurs, the past haunts Wintervale. A stolen patent, a broken trust, a family ruined. These are the secrets buried in the snow. The kinetic generator was no miracle, but a desperate gambit, perhaps to atone for old sins. Who among you knew of Arthur Whitmore? The room tensed. Charles's fists clenched, and Sophie's gaze dropped. Victor Langley spoke up, his tone smooth. Whitmore's name means nothing to me, Poirot. But if the generator was a fraud, that changes things. Dr. Crane nodded. I suspected as much. The science was shaky. Reginald was no genius. He was a showman. Mrs. Price gasped. A fraud! Oh, how scandalous! Clara Dunworthy's needles paused. Some secrets are better left buried, Monsieur Poirot. Digging them up only brings trouble. Poirot smiled faintly. Trouble, mademoiselle, is where the truth lies, and I shall find it. As the guests dispersed, Poirot stood by the fire, the charred paper fragment and Whitmore's letter burning in his mind. The generator was a catalyst, but the motive was older, rooted in betrayal. Sophie's connection to Whitmore, Thomas's nervousness, the manor's debts, all pointed to a killer driven by vengeance or desperation. The snow outside held no footprints, but the secrets within Wintervale were beginning to surface, and Poirot's grey cells were poised to unearth them all. Chapter 9. The Eve of Revelation. The snow-laden silence of Christmas morning cloaked Wintervale Manor, but within its walls a storm of suspicion brewed. The murder of Sir Reginald Haverford, stabbed in a locked study with no footprints in the snow, had transformed the festive gathering into a crucible of secrets. Hercule Poirot, his green eyes gleaming with purpose, stood in the grand hall, the weight of his discoveries pressing upon him. The charred paper fragment, the letters of Arthur Whitmore, the manor's debts, and the mysterious Sophie Laurent, all were threads in a tapestry of deceit, and Poirot's grey cells were weaving them into a pattern that pointed to the killer. The eve of revelation had arrived, and the truth was within reach. The guests, confined by the blizzard and Poirot's relentless inquiry, gathered in the drawing-room, their faces pale under the glow of flickering candles. The Christmas tree, adorned with glass baubles, stood as a mocking reminder of the season's lost joy. Lady Eleanor sat rigidly, her hands twisting a silk handkerchief. Charles paced, his eyes shadowed with a mix of grief and defiance. Beatrice clutched her rosary, her lips moving in silent prayer. Dr. Mortimer Crane, his scepticism undimmed, scribbled in his notebook, while Victor Langley's calculating gaze swept the room. Mrs. Lavinia Price, her gossip silenced, fanned herself nervously. Miss Clara Dunworthy's knitting needles clicked with a steady rhythm, and Miss Sophie Laurent, her elegance frayed, avoided Poirot's piercing stare. Poirot had spent the morning piecing together the clues. The letter from Arthur Whitmore accusing Sir Reginald of betrayal, the ledger revealing the Manor's financial ruin, and the photograph in Thomas's room linking Sophie to Whitmore's family. The kinetic generator, Sir Reginald's Christmas miracle, was no scientific marvel, but a desperate bid to restore the family's fortunes, or a facade to mask deeper sins. The locked room, the untouched snow, the misplaced log in the fireplace, all pointed to a killer of cunning and precision. Now Poirot was ready to tighten the net. He addressed the group, his voice calm but commanding. Mesdames et messieurs, the murder of Sir Reginald is a puzzle of human passions. Greed, vengeance, betrayal. The truth lies not in the impossible, but in the unseen. Let us unravel it together on this Christmas morning. He began with the generator, turning to Dr. Crane. Monsieur le Docteur, you called Sir Reginald's invention a bluff. Why? Crane adjusted his spectacles, his tone sharp. The diagrams were nonsense. Perpetual motion is impossible. He was either deluded or deceiving us. I suspect the latter to attract investors like Langley. Victor Langley bristled. I'm no fool, Poirot. Reginald promised a demonstration. If it was a fraud, he was playing a dangerous game. Poirot nodded, his eyes flicking to Lady Eleanor. Madame, your husband's debts were crushing. Was the generator his salvation, or a lie to hide his failures? Lady Eleanor's face paled, but she answered steadily. Reginald believed in it. He said it would save us, but he was desperate. The Manor, our legacy, it was slipping away. Poirot turned to Charles, whose fists clenched. Monsieur Charles, you argued with your father about the generator's risks. Did you know it was a fraud? Charles's eyes flashed. I suspected it. He was obsessed, pouring money we didn't have into that machine. I told him it would ruin us, but he wouldn't listen. Beatrice interjected, her voice trembling. Charles only wanted to protect the family, Monsieur Poirot. Father was reckless. Poirot's moustache twitched. The family's tensions were clear, but he sensed a deeper motive. He turned to Sophie, his gaze piercing. Mademoiselle Laurent, you are not what you seem. Your true name is Clara Whitmore, daughter of Arthur Whitmore, who accused Sir Reginald of stealing his patent. Is this not so? The room gasped. Sophie's face drained of colour, her hands trembling. How did you know? Poirot held up the photograph he'd found in Thomas's room. This, mademoiselle. You came to Wintervale not as an artist, but as a daughter seeking justice. Did you kill Sir Reginald for his betrayal of your father? Sophie's eyes filled with tears. No, I hated him, yes, my father died broken because of him, but I didn't kill him. I only wanted answers. Clara Dunworthy's needle stopped. Foolish girl, she muttered. Some debts are better left unpaid. Poirot's gaze shifted to the footman, Thomas, who stood by the door, his face ashen. Monsieur Thomas, you are Sophie's cousin, are you not? Your clumsiness, your absence at midnight, you were aiding her, or perhaps acting on her behalf? Thomas stammered. I only helped her get hired here. I didn't do anything else, I swear. Poirot's mind raced. Sophie's motive was strong, but her tears seemed genuine. Thomas's nervousness suggested complicity, but not necessarily murder. The key lay elsewhere, in the study, in the fireplace, in the ash. He addressed the group once more. The killer used the locked room to deceive us, but the fireplace tells another story. A log was moved, A paper burned. Someone entered and left without disturbing the snow. He paced, his voice rising. The charred fragment spoke of an agreement and trust. Arthur Whitmore's letter revealed a stolen patent. The manor's debts drove Sir Reginald to create a false miracle, but someone saw through the lie. Someone with a motive rooted in the past. The guests exchanged glances, their tension palpable. Poirot stopped before the fireplace, his eyes gleaming. The killer entered through a hidden passage, n'est-ce pas? The fireplace conceals a door, used in older manors for servants or escapes. The log was moved to hide its use, the ash a trace of the killer's haste. Grayson the butler paled. A passage? I've heard rumours, but I've never seen it. Poirot smiled faintly. Monsieur Grayson, you know this manor's secrets. Show me. Reluctantly, Grayson led Poirot to the study, the others trailing behind. By the fireplace, Poirot pressed a panel, revealing a narrow passage, its walls damp with age. Voila! He exclaimed. The killer entered here, stabbed Sir Reginald, and left, locking the door from within. The snow remained untouched, the illusion complete. Mrs. Price gasped. But who knew about this passage? Poirot's eyes swept the group. Someone with knowledge of the manor's history and a motive to kill. The truth is close, mes amis. As the guests whispered, Poirot's mind honed in on the final piece. The passage explained the how, but the why lay in the charred paper, the stolen patent, and the desperate lie of the generator. The confrontation was imminent, and Poirot's grey cells were poised to unmask the killer, bringing the eve of revelation to its dramatic close. Chapter 10. The Final Denouement. The snow continued to fall over Wintervale Manor, its silent descent a stark contrast to the charged atmosphere within. Christmas morning had dawned with a grim revelation. Sir Reginald Haverford's murder, a dagger to the heart in a locked study, with no footprints in the snow, had been orchestrated through a hidden passage behind the fireplace. Hercule Poirot, his green eyes blazing with the fire of certainty, stood in the drawing-room. The guests gathered around him like actors awaiting the final act. The kinetic generator, the charred paper fragment, the stolen patent of Arthur Whitmore, and the manor's crushing debts had woven a tapestry of deceit. And now Poirot was ready to unravel it, revealing the killer in a denouement as precise as his moustache. The room was a study in tension. Lady Eleanor sat, her face pale but composed, her hands gripping the arms of her chair. Charles stood by the window, his fists clenched, his eyes darting between defiance and despair. Beatrice, her rosary abandoned, hovered near her mother, her expression one of quiet dread. Dr. Mortimer Crane's notebook lay forgotten, his scepticism replaced by unease. Victor Langley's calculating smile had vanished, his gaze sharp with anticipation. Mrs. Lavinia Price's fan lay still, her gossip silenced by the weight of the moment. Miss Clara Dunworthy's knitting needles were quiet, her lips pursed, while Miss Sophie Laurent, revealed as Clara Whitmore, daughter of Arthur, stood with a mix of defiance and fear. The butler, Grayson, and the footman Thomas lingered at the edges, their faces betraying their own secrets. Poirot raised a hand, commanding silence. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice steady and resonant, "the murder of Sir Reginald Haverford is no longer a mystery. The locked room, the untouched snow, the kinetic generator, these were but stage props in a drama of betrayal and vengeance. I, Hercule Poirot, have seen through the illusion, and the truth stands revealed." He paced, his small frame radiating authority. "Let us begin with the crime. Sir Reginald was stabbed in his study, the door locked, the window secure, the snow unbroken. Yet, a hidden passage behind the fireplace allowed the killer to enter and leave undetected, locking the door from within to create the illusion of an impossible crime. The misplaced log, the ash on the desk, the charred paper fragment, these were the traces of their cunning. The guests murmured, but Poirot pressed on. The motive lies in the past. Arthur Whitmore, Sir Reginald's former partner, was betrayed when Reginald stole his patent, leaving Whitmore penniless and broken. His daughter Clara Whitmore, known to us as Sophie Laurent, came to Wintervale seeking justice. He turned to Sophie, whose eyes widened. But you, mademoiselle, did not kill. Your anger was real, but your tears were genuine. Sophie's shoulders sagged, relief mingling with grief. I only wanted him to admit what he did to my father, she whispered. Poirot nodded, turning to the group. The kinetic generator was no miracle, but a desperate lie. Sir Reginald, drowning in debt, crafted a facade to attract investors like Monsieur Langley, or to salvage his legacy. The manor's ledger revealed his ruin, and the generator was his last gamble. But someone saw through the deception, someone with a deeper grudge. His gaze fell on Lady Eleanor, who stiffened. Madame, you spoke of a letter, an old debt. You knew of Whitmore's betrayal, did you not? And you knew the generator was a fraud. Lady Eleanor's lips trembled, but she nodded. Reginald confessed it to me weeks ago. He said it was our only hope to save Wintervale. I went along with it. Poirot's eyes gleamed. But you did not kill. The killer was someone who knew the manor's secrets. Someone with access to the passage, someone driven by a personal betrayal. He turned to Charles, whose face paled. Monsieur Charles, you argued with your father, called his generator madness. But your anger was not about the machine, was it? It was about the family's ruin, and your mother's suffering. Charles's voice was hoarse. I hated what he was doing to us, but I didn't kill him. Poirot raised a hand. No, you did not. The killer is one who moved silently, who used the passage with familiarity, who burned a paper to hide their motive. He paused, his gaze settling on Grayson, the butler. Monsieur Grayson, you have served Wintervale for decades. You knew of the passage used in the manor's Elizabethan days for servants and escapes. You knew of Whitmore's betrayal, for you were here when it happened. And you knew the generator was a fraud, threatening to expose Sir Reginald's lies. Grayson's stoic mask cracked, his eyes widening. Monsieur Poirot, Poirot cut him off, his voice rising. You were more than a butler. You were Arthur Whitmore's confidant, his friend. When he died, you remained, biding your time, watching Sir Reginald squander his stolen wealth. The generator's unveiling was the final insult, a mockery of Whitmore's genius. You used the passage, stabbed Sir Reginald with the letter opener, and burned the agreement that linked you to Whitmore's cause. The ash, the log, these betrayed you. The room gasped. Mrs. Price's fan clattered to the floor. Clara Dunworthy's needles froze. Grayson's face crumpled, and he sank into a chair, his voice barely a whisper. He ruined Arthur, ruined us all. I couldn't let him parade that lie as a miracle. Poirot's tone softened, but his eyes remained unyielding. You sought justice, monsieur, but you chose murder. The passage, known only to you and a few, was your path. The letter opener, a weapon of opportunity. The snow, untouched, sealed your illusion. But the little grey, cells, they see all. Beatrice sobbed, clinging to her mother. Charles stepped forward, his voice breaking. Grayson, how could you? Grayson looked away, his hands trembling. I'm sorry, Master Charles. It was for Arthur, for justice. Poirot addressed the group. "The authorities will arrive when the snow clears. Monsieur Grayson will face justice, but the truth is restored. The generator was a lie, but Sir Reginald's death was no miracle. It was human, all too human." As the guests dispersed, their relief tinged with sorrow, Poirot stood by the fire, the weight of the case lifting. The snow outside continued to fall, but within Wintervale the shadows had parted. Justice had been served, and Poirot's grey cells could rest until the